Till now we have discussed about business environment in general. Then we have discussed about micro environment or this uh, five force analysis of Michael Porter. Then we have discussed about economic environment. We discussed about corporate social responsibility and so on and so forth. But exclusively in the context of India, we have not discussed. And since we are in India and we most of us will be residing in India and we need to be aware about the Indian business environment. So today we shall be discussing about Indian business environment exclusively. So when we talk about Indian business environment, what is the first thing that comes to our mind? Anyone? What may be the unique feature of Indian business environment? Or when we utter the word Indian business environment, what is the first thing that comes to our mind? Anyone, just tell it.
So presence of public and private sectors in
Yes,
the market
yes,
and low income of the majority of the people.
yes, very good. Okay, so more or less you are on the right track. So today we shall be discussing about that only. So when we have to talk about Indian business environment, we have to be very much focused about one thing, that the word liberalization. And this is the word liberalization because the Indian economy is primarily characterized as a liberalized economy. So we need to know about the liberalization, what about the history of liberalization and what is exactly liberalization and what is the outcome or the result of liberalization and what are the things that we are witnessing right now, out of which what is the impact of liberalization on our life, on our daily life. So prior to 1991, Indian economy was primarily characterized as an economy which had huge walls. It was a tariff wall created all around the economy, that we will be isolated from the world, and basically it was the idea was to give protection to our indigenous industries. So idea was that if foreign players were allowed to come into India, then our indigenous industries, our indigenous players, they won't be able to survive. And because of that, a protection was given. So primarily prior to 1991, the approach of government of India was a protectionist on the economy, and the policy was a protectionist policy. Just that is to give protection to the local industries. And how this protection was given? By building or erecting a huge tariff wall in and around the economy, that if someone is willing to sell goods in India, then he or she have to pay, and that company have to pay huge custom duty. And that's why when that particular product will be entering into Indian market, it will be very costly, and that's why the foreign products will be costlier in India, and thus the indigenous companies product will be cheaper and they will be getting market. And that's why if you see the movies of 70s and 80s, then in those movies the big man or the rich man, he or she happens to be a very big smuggler, because smuggling was a very big business during those days. Because if you can avoid this the formal trade route, that is to pay the custom duty, so you can avoid or you can save a huge amount of custom duty on your product, and in a way you can save your product, you can sell your product in Indian market at a cheaper rate. So smuggling was a big business during those days because of this custom wall. But yes, another feature of Indian economy prior to 1991 was Hindu rate of growth. Hindu rate of growth, it was the term adopted or the coined by Professor Rajiv Krishna. He was an economist. And what was the Hindu rate of growth? Since 1950 to 1990, almost 40 years. We can take it from 1947 to 1950, almost 43 years. The idea was you adopt X policy, the growth will be 3.5%. You adopt Y policy, the growth will be 5%, 3.5%. you adopt Z policy and the growth will be 3.5%. So whatever the policy you adopt, the growth will be 3.5% only. It was the experience, and that's why a term was coined, Hindu rate of growth, that which is just designated to show that whatever that pro policy will be adopting, the growth rate will be just only 3.5%, irrespective of the policy, irrespective of the government in the center or in the states, growth is not going to happen. This was one challenge, another feature of Indian economy during those times. And in 1990, another crisis came. It was the Gulf crisis, then inflation and the huge budgetary deficit and balance of payment. And the Prime Minister Chandrasekhar in 1990 and 91, he was under a tremendous pressure. And he was under such pressure, in the shape of the Indian economy was so bad that none of the banks in the world, none of the international money lenders, they were ready to pay us money. That was the credibility of a sovereign country like India. And that's why we have to pledge our gold reserve, which is with the Reserve Bank of India, with the Bank of England to get money, because India was having such a huge financial crisis during that time that our credit rating was degraded to such a low extent that none of the lenders in the world like Bank of England or International Monetary Fund or World Bank were ready to lend money to the government of India to run their operations. And that's why we have to mortgage our gold with the Bank of England, and then money was given and we could survive during those time. So this was the situation of Indian economy in 1991. And then what happened? In 1991 election, Congress party won the elections, and Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao, this person, he became the Prime Minister of India, and he has adopted a different policy. And what was that policy? It was LPG policy. Now, what is LPG? So LPG, L stands for liberalization, P stands for privatization, and G stands for globalization. So this LPG policy was adopted by the Narasimha Rao government, and the then finance minister, it was the Manmohan Singh. He was the finance minister. Later he became the Prime Minister of India from 2004 to 2014. So he was the finance minister, and many people accredit Dr. Manmohan Singh as the messiah of economic reforms, but in fact it was the brain of Narasimha Rao, and it was the leadership and vision of Narasimha Rao who could allow Dr. Manmohan Singh to go ahead with his LPG policy. And now when this LPG policy was started, then there was a tremendous change in the Indian economy. And now whatever we are seeing that India is having a huge foreign exchange reserve, just remember, at one point of time India was not even not having foreign exchange to meet its day-to-day expenditure. It had the foreign exchange reserve only for 1 to 2 weeks only, means its foreign exchange reserve could meet the expenditure for maximum 2 weeks. This was the condition of Indian economy during that time. Now we have a 400 billion reserve of foreign exchange. It was a huge budgetary deficit. It was uncontrolled inflation. Economy was just 3.5%. Now our economy, if this corona period is escaped, then our economy was growing at the rate of 6 to 7%, and prior to 1991 it was 3.5%. So now average growth rate of economy is it is just double than that period, and all credit goes to the vision and leadership of this person. It's P.V. Narasimha Rao, our ex-prime minister, his vision and his leadership. Then what happened? There are certain dates we need to confirm. 23rd July 1991. It is a red letter day in Indian economic history. Why? Because on 23rd of July, the budget of 1991 was presented in Parliament. and all those economic reforms were actually given operational shape through this financial act that is called budget of 1991. But budget used to be presented in the evening at 5 o'clock evening during those days, and on the same day, that is on 23rd of July 1991, PV Narasimha Rao have allowed his state minister, I do not remember the name, to present the new industrial policy 1991. So new industrial policy was also presented on the same day in the parliament. Now what was there in the new industrial policy? First one was the abolition of license Raj. Now when we use the term liberalization, what do you mean by liberalization? You are at a liberty to do whatever you want. If you want to do something, some business, you can do. If you want to buy something, you can buy. But prior to 1991, there was absolute license Raj. Whatever you want to do, you need to obtain license. If you want to start business, you need to obtain license. If you want to buy a scooter, you need to have a license. If you want to buy LPG cylinder, you need to wait for 3 years. If you want to buy a scooter, you need to wait 7 to 8 years. If you want to have a landline telephone connection, you need to wait 3 to 4 years. So for everything you need license. So that's why in 1991, the first term that he has coined, that liberalization, that Indian economy will be liberalized, means all those licenses were just done away with. So the first point was the abolition of license Raj. So licensing was done away with. That is the liberalization. Then there was a long list of industries that were exclusively reserved for the public sector. So reservation of industries for the public sector was done, like this telephone, it was reserved for public sector. Oil and gas, reserved for public sector. Defense, for public sector. Railway, for public sector. Nuclear energy, for public sector. There are like a long list of industries which were exclusively for the public sector. In 1991 industrial policy, what happened, that all those industries which were exclusively reserved for the public sector, they were de-reserved. Means now the private sector can also operate in those sectors. Like prior to 1991, there was only one department of telecommunication, and now Department of Telecommunication was doing the job of sending doing postal services. Telephone, if you want to have a telephone connection, there was only one player, that is the Department of Telecommunication. From government only you have to obtain telephone. From the government only you have to buy the petrol or diesel or the kerosene. Government was the only supplier, means public sector companies. Air aviation, there was only Indian Airlines in the skies. There was no private players. So all these industries were reserved for the public sector. But once these industries were de-reserved, now the root of this technological revolution, this data revolution, was initiated in 1991. Prior to 1991, there was only Department of Telecommunication which was giving telephone connections. After 1991, the seeds were planted, and now we have so many companies like Idea, Vodafone, Aircel, Airtel, Reliance Jio. In the oil and gas sector, Reliance Petroleum, SR Petrol. In aviation, it's Jet Airways, Indigo, Vistara, and so on and so forth. All these companies have started entering into all those industries once these industries were de-reserved. And third one is the foreign direct investment. That has opened the route for the globalization. And because of this, FDI was allowed. All those foreign companies, whether it is Pepsi or Coca-Cola or Hindustan Unilever or Standard Chartered Bank, all those insurance companies, they have started investing in India through this foreign direct investment. So these are the three major changes made in industrial policy of 1991, which paves the way of LPG. Abolition of license Raj, have initiated liberalization. De-reservation of industries have cleared the way of privatization, and FDI have initiated or planted the seeds of globalization in Indian economy. So this was all about this new industrial policy of 1991. Then we have second generation reforms, and it was started primarily in the year 1998, and it continued up to 2004-2005. So this was primarily focused on financial sector, and second generation reforms were basically the reforms in the finance, and that's why after the second generation of reforms, FDI was allowed in bank, insurance companies were allowed through IRDA Act. IRDA Act was passed in the year 1999, and after passing of IRDA Act, private insurance companies were allowed to operate in India. Prior to 1999, there was only one insurance player in the market, that is Life Insurance Corporation of India, and there was only one general insurance company, that is the General Insurance Corporation, with having 4 subsidiaries like National Insurance, United India, and Oriental Insurance, and one more, New India. So these were the only 4 insurance companies under the banner of General Insurance Corporation. But after 1999, when this IRDA Act was passed, this foreign insurance companies were also allowed to invest in India, and now we have so many insurance companies. So this second generation of reforms were started in 1998. So there was reforms in all the sectors, all the industries, in financial sector, banks and insurance and everywhere. But the benefit of these reforms were not given, or these were not available to the farmers. There was no reforms in the agricultural sector till date, and now you must have seen these slogans in the televisions and the protest which is going on nationwide, that by the farmers. So the reforms in agriculture were initiated in 2020 through passing of 3 agricultural acts. And what will be the benefit of these agricultural acts or the disadvantage of agricultural acts, we have to see. But one thing is that through this agricultural bill was passed in the parliament in 2020, and because of which these farmers are protesting. So it will clear the way to FDI in agriculture. Now there will be direct FDI in agriculture also. Contract farming and so forth will start in agriculture. So only time will decide whether it will be good or bad. But FDI is open for the agricultural sector also as well. Fine. So when we have to discuss the features of Indian business environment, or what are the uniqueness of the Indian business environment, so we have to know about this LPG, that it is the policy which is currently running or which is currently going on in Indian economy, and all the basis of our decision making, whether we are going for the pension reforms or agricultural reforms, stock market reforms or company act, everything is going in the line with this LPG policy only: liberalization, privatization and globalization. So our economy is primarily a liberalized economy. So this is one aspect of Indian business environment. Second, someone of you have rightly stated that Indian economy is characterized by the low standard of living. Now, low standard of living is because of the poverty and non-availability of resources. This is a crude reality, and whether we like it or not, but this is a crude reality for we as an Indian, that we are not able to uplift the level of living or the standard of living of vast majority of our people who are still living below poverty line. Now, these are some of the pictures which characterize the Indian economy, that we are still living the below poverty line, and it is actually against the human dignity that after 73 or 73 plus number of years of independence, still people are residing in such unhuman conditions. So this is a question mark. Now, this low standard of living, this is a problem, but at the same time this problem is giving a lot of opportunity for we as an Indians. Now, what is that opportunity? C.K. Prahalad, an Indian management expert, he has coined the term profit at the bottom of pyramid. fortune at the bottom of pyramid. This bottom of pyramid. What did he say? He said that future lies with those companies which see poor as their customers. Because see, at the base of pyramid there are 4 billion people all around the world, and this is a big number. And any business policy or any business strategy, if we can make this 4 billion people as our customers, then that company will be definitely a successful company, and that will be a fortune company. Now, what the companies are doing? What is the response of the companies regarding this? Now, this is a shampoo. The cost of which it ranges from 200 to 2000 rupees depending upon the brand and quality. Now, everybody, all the girls, they want to wash their hairs with shampoo, and they just want to look as stylish as any other rich girl. Poor girls also want to do the same kind of style, but they cannot afford. And but what they can afford? They can afford 1 rupee. They can spend 1 rupee to buy a Clinic Plus or the sachets of the shampoo, and that they can use to wash their hairs, and they can look equally beautiful as a rich girl. So now the data shows that the companies made more profit by selling this 1 rupee sachets by selling this entire bottles of shampoo. Similarly, like another example, like say Coca-Cola or Pepsi, they have introduced a bottle of Coca-Cola in 5 rupees only. This is why, because just to target the bottom of pyramid, one bottle of Coca-Cola, which is say around 2 liters in volume, and it costs 70 to 100 rupees from brand to brand. A young poor village girl or boy, he or she cannot afford 90 rupees to buy 2 liters or 30 rupees to buy one standard bottle of Coca-Cola, but he or she can definitely afford 5 rupees to buy one bottle of Coca-Cola. So definitely that company is trying to again targeting the bottom of the pyramid. And what did I say? That future lies with those companies which see poor as their customer. Look at this girl. This girl is suffering from some eye problems. She needs cataract operation, and the cost of cataract operation in terms of US dollar, it is a 300 to $350, 300 to 350 US dollar. But looking at her condition, looking at her economic situation, she cannot spend $300. But how much she can afford? She can afford $2, that is approximately 150 or 160 rupees. So can we make available the same cost of eye treatment in $2 or $3, that they are at the max 200 rupees? If we can do it, this is a huge business model. Aurobindo Eye Hospital of Madurai, it is doing that. That 2/3 of its patients are non-paying patients. LB Prasad Eye Institute in Hyderabad, they are doing it. Almost half of their patients are non-paying patients. They are not paying the full cost of the surgery, but still they are doing that. And this is a huge business model. This Aurobindo Eye Hospital is not a charitable hospital, or LB Prasad Eye Institute is not a charitable institute. They are making huge profit because they are able to see poor as their customers. Tata Nano, a car within $2,000. It's a 1 lakh takiya car. That is also they are trying to provide car who cannot afford it, but who can buy a motorcycle. So instead of buying motorcycle, can they buy Tata Nano? Although there are some problem going on with the Tata Nano, but still they are trying to hit that segment of the society. So profit or the fortune, it lies at the bottom of pyramid, and definitely those companies will be successful companies in the days to come. Another characterization of Indian economy is a parallel economy. Now, lot of things has already been spoken about parallel economy. So I will not be discussing too much about the parallel economy, because every day, day and night on the television, you are listening about this parallel economy only. So parallel economy means this black economy. So this is the biggest problem, this black money or the corruption. And once this corruption or the black money is eroded from the system, definitely uh, something good can be done to our country. Then, how many of you can identify the relationship between these two? This is one audio cassette and this is the pencil. How many of you can identify the relationship between these two, the link between these two? Any one of you?
Sir, when we were young, the pencil was used to untangle the reel which used to get
Yeah,
tangled
yes. So
inside.
that was the technology available when you were young. But now, are you doing that?
No, sir.
No, because we have upgraded ourselves. Now, from this pencil and audio cassettes, now we have moved to the CD, and then from CD we have moved to pen drive, and now even pen drives are obsolete. And if you have to say, listen to some music or some entertainment, we directly go to the YouTube, and some other sites are also there. Like TikTok was one, then some other apps are also available nowadays. So this is how the technology is growing. So with the rapid growth of technology, one thing is that it is possible because of this liberalization that we have discussed earlier. Then because of this rapid growth of technology, the standard of living of people is also going up. And third, because of this rapid growth of technology, can technology be a solution to the corruption? Can technology be a solution to black money? In a way, yes. How? This digital payments is most of this black money are created because of this cash payment. We are paying cash, and cash is the root cause of all corruptions. And this Digital India initiative, or this all those technologies like Google Pay or Phone Pay or Paytm, and then all the banks having their own application of making payment, credit cards, debit cards, smart cards, all available. All this development in the technology in the long run can have a check on the corruption. We have to see. Now earlier it was the marketing, now it's digital marketing. Earlier it was finance, now it is financial technology, fintech. So everywhere this technology is dominating. First industrial revolution, it was about just mechanization. Second industrial revolution was about uh, technology. Third industrial revolution was about globalization, and then the fourth industrial revolution, that is the fourth generation of industrial revolution, is going on, and it is all about the technology. And in the technology also, it is uh, the fourth industrial revolution is all about the data connectivity. You want to buy vegetable vendor is willing to sell vegetables, you want to pay, but suppose if that there is no data connectivity, you cannot pay, because he is accepting phone pay only, or digital Google Pay or Paytm only, and you do not have cash. But if you do not have digital connectivity or data connectivity, you cannot buy products in the market smoothly. So all you need to have a data connectivity. Nowadays, only those shopkeepers are getting good number of customers who are connected to the data, like who are accepting this Google Pay or this digital payments or credit cards. They are able to attract more number of customers than the shopkeeper who are not having all these. So the future generation will be all about the technological development. Now, social change. Another characterization of Indian economy is the social change. When we are young, the family picture, it happens to be like this. Okay, grandfather, grandmother, uncle, auntie, their niece, and all children's, boys, girls, brothers, sisters, everybody. mother, father, they used to reside in the same family. And when we have to take a family picture, it was like this. Then family, the pictures started to be looking like this. Only mother, father, and their kids. And then family picture started to look like this, that only husband and wife, this ding family, double income, no kids. दिन को husband काम करेगा, रात को wife काम करेगी, तो कभी मिलेंगे नहीं, and ultimately they do not have kids, so that ultimately they will be called ding family. And future size of families will be like this. So in future, husband and wife staying together will be called as joint family. So this is social change which is which we have witnessed. This is only one description of social change. Now, because of this social change, what kind of businesses have changed? What kind of changes we have witnessed or we have visualized in business arena? When the size of family was this, and then since there are more number of people in the family, we do not require dishwasher, because there are plenty of hands available to wash your plates and dishes. So you do not require dishwasher. You do not require washing machine also, because there were more number of people. So what will they do? So one person will wash the dishes, one person will wash the clothes, one person will cook food. So you do not require dishwasher, you do not require washing machine, you do not require cold drinks, because one bottle of cold drink will not be sufficient. So if you want to serve cold drink to each one of your family members, you need to buy at least 1 dozen of big bottles. Then only it will be everybody in your family members will be getting. So getting a cold drink during those days was a big thing. It was offered only during when there was some marriages in someone's house. Then only we used to get cold drinks. Otherwise, cold drink was a very luxurious item for us when we were kids. But now our kids, cold drink is just like an ordinary thing. Since there will be more number of people, so there will be more variety of foods available. So nobody will be demanding Maggie kind of things or noodles. So Maggie or noodles will not be required in this kind of family, because there are more number of people who could cook food, who could prepare different kind of dishes, and then the kids, they will not be demanding Maggie. Okay. Now, when the social change from joint family, it had came to this level. Now what this person will require? This person will require all kinds of electronic gadgets. He will require washing machine, he will require ironing machine, he will require washing machine, he will require all kinds of electronic gadgets. He will require Maggie, because he do not have sufficient time to cook food. He require more number of personal care products. He will watch more adult content on TV. This family will not watch most of the adult content on TV. Then disinvestment of public sector undertakings. This is also related to this privatization. Most of the public sector undertakings have started to be disinvested. Earlier there was Department of Telecommunication. Now we have BSNL. It's a corporatization of Department of Telecommunication. Now what happens after when this disinvestment of public sector undertakings started? Like selling ownership to the private players, that is NALCO, National Aluminium Company, that was sold to Anil Agarwal Group. IPOs, another form of disinvesting was bringing IPO, that majority of the shares will be controlled by the government, but some shares will be released to the public, general public, through by issue of IPOs, and this IPO will be there. PPPs, public-private partnership, like government and some private players, both of them will be there, and they will jointly produce something like Maruti Suzuki. Maruti is a government of India company, Suzuki is a private company. Both of them are coming together, collaborating, and they are producing Maruti Suzuki cars. Contracting out, that most of the entire structure will be a public sector, but most of the jobs the critical jobs they will be contracting out. Like in triple IT or in your colleges or in most of these industrial houses, say securities, or like in railway also, this supplying of food, cleaning, all these are contracted out to the private players. So cleaning of stations, cleaning of trains, they are contracting out to the private players. So they are maintaining. Indian Railway is not doing that. They are simply making payment to the contractors. Our outsourcing, like our security agency is outsourced. uh, our security guards, they are not the employee of our organization, they are employee of some other organization, so we have just outsourced. So these are the different ways of disinvestment of public sector undertakings. Family succession is another feature of Indian business environment. Though this is a very crude reality, whether we like it or not, or whatsoever professional we call ourselves, but still in Indian business environment, Dhirubhai Ambani, Reliance was created by Dhirubhai Ambani, and when Dhirubhai Ambani dies, his son Mukesh Ambani will take over the empire, and it is a known reality that once Mukesh Ambani will no longer be there, then his son or his daughter will be looking after the business. So is the case in other business environment, whether it is a Mahindra or Birla or any other Tatas. To some extent, they are trying to bring professionalism, that family succession will not be there, and they are successful to some extent. But still, vast majority of Indian businesses are still having a family succession. So this is in brief about the Indian business environment. Uh, yes, another feature is the indigenous and international investors. Now, in Indian business environment, we have lot of investors. DII stands for domestic institutional investors. Like most of this Indian, like SBI mutual fund or pension funds or LIC, they are the domestic institutional investors. They are playing a big role in stock market, and FIIs are the foreign institutional investors. So they are also playing a big role. So both of them are operating simultaneously in Indian stock market. So this is another feature of Indian business environment. Thank you for your patient listening. Thank you.